Welcome everyone, and as you're all coming into the room now, thank you for filling out the intake forms and for advising me beforehand of any injuries you may be nursing at the moment or any limitations you may have today with your practice. Also, just so you know, this is an open class that is suitable for all levels, beginner through to advanced, and I'll be offering different suggestions, different levels of asana throughout the practice so that you can, practice within your own limitations today or challenge yourself as much as you feel comfortable. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Toilets are out the door, around to the right down the hallway. And in case of an emergency, please go out the door, back down the stairs in which you came up to come to class today, meeting across the road. That is our meeting point in case of any emergencies. So just to ensure you all have the right props today, we'll need a bolster, 2 blankets and 2 blocks. Also, I do have some evaluation forms, which it would be great if you could fill that out at the end of today's practice. So self-awareness throughout our practice today will be really important. I'll be offering safe variations. However, please just take my instruction as a guide only. If you're having any troubles in any particular poses and that might be related to any injuries, I do suggest you seek medical professionals' advice before continuing to practice. Listening to your body first and foremost, that self-awareness is paramount. If you need to just sit a pose out or make any modifications, adjustments, or if you need any assistance to do that, please do so. By no means do I want you putting yourself in any compromising positions or creating any injuries. Our objectives today are to explore opening the stomach meridian line and the spleen meridian lines, which will help support as well our digestive systems. So this is an Earth Yin sequence. We'll be exploring Santosha today, which is the second of the niyamas, which Santosha in Sanskrit, San meaning complete and Tosha meaning contentment or acceptance. So Santosha is the state of underlying contentment with what life is offering you. So as we come into a comfortable seat now, I ask that you just softly close down the eyes or keep a soft lowered focus or gaze just out in front. And just contemplating, how often do you think to yourself, I will be happier with, when, or if? If I meditate, I'll be more at ease, more content. If I do yin, I'll be more flexible. If I'm contented, people will love me. If. We can waste a lot of energy trying to fulfill the conditions we place on our lives. We might be trying to push away things we don't want to attract the things we do. Then when we get what we want, we may lose it again, or we may never get the things we pursue. The set of conditions becomes a moving target. Initially, we may feel content with attainment, and then apathy may fall over us as the things we sought so eagerly lose their shine. So let yoga today not be about meeting a set of conditions so that you can find happiness. Instead, let it be a practice of meeting all the parts of yourself with sweetness and love. Your shortcomings, your stiff body, your aching heart, perhaps the extra pounds you want to lose, the mood that swept through your house, sickness, breakups, boredom, impatience, especially confusion, doubts, and fears. Santosha is an inside job that asks us to ride the waves of life as it's being presented and to look for the sweet spot that radiates satisfaction regardless of our life's conditions. So we'll start with the mantra, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, to find peace and contentment in every moment of your practice, and coming back to this mantra as we progress throughout the next hour. Inhale. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Inhale. And again. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. One last time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So for our first pose today, I just want you to be mindful if you have any heart problems, headaches, laying on our back, any knee or ankle issues, you might like to avoid this altogether. And what we're going to do to come into this pose is just coming up onto sitting on your knees. If your ankles are complaining here, you might like to try a blanket underneath them. Or if there's any pain in the knees, skip this one out. Lean back on the hands, create a little arch in the lower back. Check in with how this feels. And if it feels okay to go a little further, you might come down onto your elbows. Otherwise, you might take a bolster and lay it lengthwise along your spine. But we're coming into a half saddle today. So one leg will be outstretched. We'll be taking our right leg out in front. So that left foot is alongside our hip there somewhere. So our half saddle. So just easing your way into this pose, coming back as far as feels comfortable for you today. Those of you who do have quite a good range of movement in this pose, you might like to hug that straight leg in towards your chest. That will really deepen this pose. You might also like to lift your hips even higher, placing a block between the feet and under the buttocks for a deeper variation of this pose. And just feel that compression in the lumbar sacral arch, that stretching of the hip flexors and quads. And if you drop the head back, it stimulates the thyroid also here. It can help relieve any digestive issues and gas, as you can feel it opening those front lines through that stomach area. Also, it can help relieve menopause symptoms, swelling of the legs during pregnancy, and it's also therapeutic for high blood pressure and asthma. So a really amazing pose here. You'll feel that stretching of the thighs, knees, perhaps the ankles, strengthening of the arches. I'm going to hold each side for 3 minutes. To safely release from this pose, just come out in reverse to how we went up. It can be a little tricky sometimes, but propping ourselves back up on our elbows, pushing back up onto our hands. You might even be able to roll over onto your side and swing both legs out in front. And if you do get stuck in your wave, I will offer to come over and give you a hand. And then we'll lie down on our belly, straightening the legs out behind us to allow our knees to release. Now we're already on our bellies. So contraindications for our next one, if you have a bad back or tight sacrum, or if there's any sharp pains here, you must come out. If you are pregnant, we want to avoid pressing the belly into the floor and use bolsters under the pelvis and the forearms. And avoid this pose if you have a headache today. So laying down on our belly, we want to clasp our elbows with the opposite hands and move the elbows just ahead of your shoulders, propping yourself up. Notice how this feels in your lower back. If the sensations are too strong, move your elbows further ahead, lowering your chest closer to the floor. And if you like, you can place your palms flat on the floor in front of you like a sphinx. So for some alternatives for this Sphinx pose, you might rest on your ribs, sliding the elbows away to reduce compression, or use a cushion under the elbows, helping to elevate the chest and deepen the posture further still, or a bolster under the armpits to relax completely. So finding the right height for you, to find that right compression for your lower back. And being yin, it's actually okay to sag the shoulders a little and settle into the pose. And the benefits of this pose is that compression and stimulation of that sacral lumbar arch. So between L2 and L3 vertebrae, it's called the door of life, and this is where Jing energy is housed. It's toning our spine in this pose. It can be therapeutic for people with bulging or herniated discs. And again, if the head is dropped back, it can stimulate our thyroid. So in this sequence, we are exploring those opening lines of the stomach and the spleen meridian lines, that element being earth, nourishment, contentment, stability, adaptability, empathy, and care. You can try to harness these feelings, these emotions, these qualities, whilst you breathe through these shapes, through these different asana, to really enrich your practice today. And then to safely come on out of the pose, we just slowly lower our chest down to the floor and turn our head to one side. You can rest your cheeks on your palms. We might like to decompress the lower back more by sliding one knee up, choosing the knee that you're looking towards, and keep the knee and the foot on the floor. Child's pose can be a nice counter pose following our Sphinx. So from that child's pose, before we come into our next shape, if you have any issues with your knees, kneecaps, ankles, or if you're feeling a little stiff through the thighs, you might support the back knee with a blanket or place a bolster under the shin, allowing your back knee to be up off the floor. It can be a bit niggly for some. So what we're going to do is come up into a downward facing dog. Inhale, lifting our right leg. Step that right foot between your hands. Keep walking that front foot forward until the knee is right above the right heel. Slide the back knee backwards as far as you can. Again, you can have that back knee supported. Keep the hands either side of the front foot. So lifting that back leg up off the floor is a much more advanced version of this pose. If your ankle feels a little uncomfortable, you might place a blanket underneath or give me a wave. I can help come and do that for you. Coming into our dragon pose here. It's a deep hip and groin opener that gets right into that hip joint, stretches the back legs, hip flexors and quads. There's lots of different variations here, which we will explore a little today to work deeply into the hip socket. And this pose can be helpful for those of you struggling with sciatica. I'm just going to show you the variations of this pose. So we also have, or you might just rest your hands on your thigh like so. And the first alternative is a low lunge, or otherwise known as baby dragon. So in this one, you might just rest your hands on blocks either side of you. The next is to rest your hands or arms on the front of the thigh and lift the chest and this is called dragon flying high. A deeper option is dragon flying low, where we drop both hands, forearms down to the ground, lowering the hips further still. For more depth, come down onto the elbows and you might rest them on a bolster or a block. We have a twisted dragon where one hand pushes the front knee to the side while the chest rotates to the sky. And in wing dragon, with the hands on the floor, wing out the knee a few times, rolling onto the outside edge of that foot, and then stay there with the knee low. You could come down on the elbows or rest them on a block or bolster. An overstepping dragon is where we actually, from baby dragon, allow the front knee to come far forward or slide the heel backwards until the heel is just about to lift off the ground. So quite a few variations there. And the fire breathing dragon is any of those variations I've already mentioned, but we tuck the back toe under and lift the back knee up. So we're lengthening that back leg. That puts more weight into the hips and increases the stretch further still. But please only do that one if you are really comfortable in this pose and you do practice this shape often and you are wanting to go that little deeper today. And then to come out of this pose, we're going to come up into a downward dog position again before we change sides. So we're going to move the back knee forward a little bit, tuck the back toes under, and then push and press up, stepping on back into downward facing dog, Ardha Mukha Svanasana. Walking it out here in our downward facing dog. Just coming down onto the knees while I demonstrate the next pose. Again, if anyone has any sciatica issues, this one can aggravate. So if that is the case, elevate your hips. We want to sit up on some height, cushion, bolster, blanket folded until our knees are below the hips, or just avoid this pose altogether. Give me a wave if that's the case, and I'll give you an alternative. We want to make sure our hips aren't rotating backwards while seated. We want them to rotate forward. Any lower back disorders that don't allow flexion of the spine, don't allow your spine to round in this pose. Try to keep your back as straight as possible, or try the reclining version. Avoid dropping the head down if your neck has had any injuries. So from a seated position now, so we'll just come to a seat. We'll bring the soles of our feet together for butterfly pose. You might know this as Baddha Konasana. Bound angle pose, cobbler pose, it has lots of different names. Bring the soles of your feet together and then slide them away from you, allowing your back to round if you don't have any back issues. Folding forward, lightly resting your hands on your feet or the floor in front of you, and your head should hang down towards your heels. Sometimes I like to put a bolster or a cushion in front for me to rest my forehead on, or across the thighs. And then coming out of this pose, we'll just push into our hands, push the floor away, slowly rolling up before straightening your legs. Lean back on the hands to release the hips and slowly straightening each leg out one at a time. I might like to do a few little windshield wipers here from side to side. And then for one of our final poses, we'll revisit the saddle pose, which we did at the start of this sequence. And you'll notice this sequence has interchange between asymmetrical and symmetrical poses to counter. And now we're finishing with poses that are beneficial for both the spleen and stomach meridians. So the full version of saddle is where we'll take both legs at the same time. Have a bolster if needed for the full version. So I want you again to just come to sitting on your heels, checking in with how that feels for your ankles, and then you might move those feet out a little wider, sitting between your feet, and explore that gentle reclining backwards. If anyone would like a hand, if you would like me to come and place a bolster underneath along your spine, please let me know. We're going to hold this pose a little longer. And as we settle in here, can we contemplate how we can find contentment, not just on our mats, but in our day-to-day lives? Can we be content with what we have? Rejoice in the way things are done. And when you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And this is a famous quote by Lao Tzu that you may or may not have heard before. We'll use this last pose for our meditation, mindfulness, the practice of conscious attention on the present without judgment. Can you allow yourself to be fully present in this moment, in this pose? Mindful, conscious attention without judgment. You find your mind starts to drift or wander. As soon as you become aware of this, just bring it back to this moment, the body, the breath. Conscious attention on the present without judgment. To come out of this pose, those of you who are quite flexible, you might be able to flip your legs around to the sides until they're straight out in front. Otherwise, coming up out in reverse. So the same way you went down, so slowly edging up onto elbows, pressing up onto hands. If you're feeling quite stuck or need a hand, just give me a little hoy and I will come over and assist you. Once you are up, lay yourself straight back down with as little fuss as possible. We're laying ourselves down, setting up for Shavasana. But before we take Shavasana, we practice a short pranayama. This pranayama is a great one to practice at all times for all people, at all stages of life, as it has no contraindications, no cautions. It is, however, best that this pranayama is practiced on an empty stomach. So the technique, often it's done seated, but we're going to do this one lying down today. So you want to place your index finger on the cartilage between the cheek and the ear. Be careful to only use a gentle pressure. And we'll take an inhale through the nose, and when you exhale, you're going to make a loud humming sound like a bee. The sound can be low to medium pitched, and we're going to repeat this 5 times. And I want you to notice how the sound waves gently vibrate in your body, noticing where. So that full mindfulness once again, checking in with that sensation. Once you complete the practice, you'll return to your normal breath and settle into your Shavasana. Now the benefits, this can really relieve tension, anxiety, anger, calm the mind. It's a cooling practice and it improves concentration and memory. And it calms the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, helps reduce blood pressure. So we'll take those fingers, placing them now on the cartilage between the cheeks and the ear. Take an inhale through the nose, and as you exhale, a loud humming sound like a bee. Practice that in your own time. 5 in total. Before settling into Shavasana. looking for that contentment within in all moments in our life when we have those moments of mindfulness, coming back to the here and now. Without judgment, being content with what we have. Santosha. Now slowly listening for the sound of my voice. To bring our awareness back into the space around us. And starting to make some small movements through the fingers and the toes. Before rolling over onto your side, pressing yourself up. Once again to a comfortable seat. Comfortable keeping the eyes closed. We'll close our practice again as we started. Our invocation of Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Just taking a breath in, sighing it out as you exhale. And inhale now for Om. Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bring your hands together at the heart center. Bowing your head to your heart. Namaste.